I haven't explained yet how a lot of the system works, and I'm going to get to that eventually. But today I'm sitting down to work on the simulation some more, and I want to start capturing these. You know, it's January now. Today's January 4th. I just finished putting together the first introduction video and getting that out, and I'd like to keep on making progress on the simulation as my primary uh, task, right? I'm not trying to turn this into something that I'm going to teach from yet with educational videos or anything like that. So I just want to do my process, make more progress, but I want to start capturing important steps and see if I can turn those into refined videos later on. And if I don't capture them while I'm doing them, I'll never remember exactly how it happened. So here we go. I'm getting ready to do a day of work, take on one challenge. And that's this one here. So I have these things called brain scripts, and these are kind of inspired by, let me pull it up, and maybe I'll edit the back and forth here. Where is that? There's this game, which was made by someone who I know, Jacob Bell, who hangs out. This was demoed at Handmade one year, and it's up here on Handmade Network. And you can actually go play this on itch too. And it's this little game of like you sort of program out the behaviors of each member of your party, and then those little bots run through combat, and you see if your AI is good enough to win or not. It's inspired by another game, Final Fantasy 12, I think was the one Jacob referenced, that also has a gambit system where you sort of program your party with little rules. And if you take a look at what those rules look like, there's like a condition, and then it like helps you pick a target. So health less than 60%. So if you have an ally with health less than 60%, then you do heal, and that's the first rule in the system. So that would apply earlier than other rules, right? That would take precedence. So I decided to kind of take a cue from that structure. And so my brain scripts look like, let me pick just a simple one here. My brain scripts look like this. Oh, wait, these are tiles. Where am I? I need, the brain scripts. Here we go. So you can see there's like a rule here. So when you're picking what tactics to use, the mercenary has a tactic called hang back. And there's this logic here that's basically under this condition, use this tactic, right? And then there's a bunch of stuff about this that I haven't actually thought through. So this was sort of thought of as like one rule, one line of the rules. And if you can only use one tactic, this would take precedence since it came first. That was kind of the thinking. And I was taking that cue from both of those games. And it kind of works, but there are a couple of limitations to doing things this way that, or not limitations, there are a couple of quirks to doing things this way that I have not wrapped my head around what I want to do about them yet. One thing is that there are actually two different types of reasons why I want to write these brain scripts. There's kind of two different things going on. There are, and I mentioned this sort of sloppily in the first video, there are creatures. So like if I were to look at like my snake, there's creatures, and I just want to be able to script out a creature's behavior to be a very simple, predictable, I want the creatures to have simple, predictable behavior. It's not supposed to be like, chess AIs making the best possible move. They are just predictable RPG enemies. But then there are also characters that are sort of meant to be more of a complex AI, like a player simulator. They simulate the player behavior to a certain extent. And of course, that can get arbitrarily complex when the strategical space is rich enough so that analyzing what's the best thing to do in each case becomes a more and more rich and complex task. And so these little scripts aren't necessarily optimal, but they're sort of still not meant to be predictable creature behaviors. They're meant to be sort of stand-ins for a full-on chess AI. I don't have the time to build a thing that can analyze my game tree, and this particular simulated game involves randomness, so it's more complex than just a chess AI in that way. And the space of possible actions is rather hard to define and separate out. I'm still kind of working on if that's even a thing I could do at some point in the future. And another thing that happens is whenever it's possible to make moves, whenever these brains trigger, it's possible to use more than one of them. So, for instance, tactics like hang back are you're allowed to use as many of them as you want and in any order. So if you have several tactics and you have conditions that say when to use them and you can use them all, then they would all get used, right? Whereas actions, right, there's these segments for deciding what tactic to use, and there's these segments for deciding what action to use. And so those are a little different, right? Like here, this wizard will randomly cast the hardened spell on a random ally, right? And that's not necessarily the strategically best thing to do with that character. If you were in control of it as a player, you would do better than this. But this is the logic. If you can use that, then it does. But this is once per day, so it doesn't keep getting used. And so when this fails to activate, even though there's no condition here, it fails to activate just because it cannot do this action. It then ends up doing a basic attack, right? And similarly with this wizard, they have a slightly different spell that it decides what to do, when to do that in a different way, but same basic thing. There's there's this set of rules, and then it just turns out that sometimes the way I want to sort of express how something behaves has some other properties. So they all have these functions all have this brain struct, and none of them actually use it except this concept for the bat right here, which is actually not even like, this isn't even real. I should just mark it like this as a potential idea. And then down here, another concept for the bat behavior would involve a special creature specific init and state system. The brain structure hasn't really been thoroughly thought through. How should this be programmed? How should it be structured, right? So I want to figure that stuff out. Anyway, point is, the one I'm actually interested in working on today is this one. So there are a couple things going on in here that I can't do in any of the brain scripts that I have. One is, this is a brain script that I've sort of imagined that would be for controlling an entire party behavior. So when I'm in the halfway through the process of introducing a sleep mechanic, and I guess I will just show you real quick how that looks so far so that you can see the before and after here. So we're going to do analyze roads mode, and I want to just see the adventure party in action and none of the others, and I want to see these ones go. So this creature has the ability to put your party members to sleep, and there are two of them, with a other basic creature here that is not too hard to deal with on its own, but when your party's being put to sleep, it might become more difficult. And if I were to run this right now and see how the party fares against this kind of enemy, and how it gets sorted against a ++2, which is sort of my benchmark for a pretty difficult creature, we'll see that actually ++2 is easier than the ++1 plus a couple of sleeper mushrooms, because our party doesn't have any way to wake itself up. So if I gave you this game right now to play, it'd feel very unfair. These things put you to sleep, and you don't wake up again until your whole party sleeps for the night. And so usually, unless you get very lucky, those sleeper shrooms put your whole party to sleep once there's a few of them per encounter, and they never wake up. They just get destroyed one round at a time once they're all asleep, and there's someone there to deal damage, right? So to avoid this effect, the sleeper shrooms should not be this dangerous, because the party members should be able to wake each other up. And I'm part of the way through a achieving that. So what's happening so far is I've set up a thing where if you're, let's go see the sleep tile. So if you have the sleep tile on your character, this should grant, so there's this game, the moment where we're collecting all the granted tiles, and tiles can grant other tiles. So the sleep tile grants a wake up action to all possible allies, right? All of your allies can choose to wake you up. It might actually, if we wanted to, we could even say that anyone could try to wake you up. Haven't gone that far yet, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't try to target enemies with a wake up action. But anyway, the wake up here is an action. It's another tile, and when this gets used as an action, it's supposed to discard the sleep tile from the target, right? So you use this, you choose a target to hit with it. When you wake them up, you remove their sleep tile. Okay, so that's how waking up works in theory, but I don't quite have a way to script it yet because, well, the way I would have to script this would be the way I scripted this, which is also a problem. But that's that if you can do a wake up action, that you would do that and preferentially do that, but otherwise move on. And so that could just be like, we could just say each character does a use wake up. You know, if there's an ally with sleep, pick one at random, target them, and wake them up. We could write the logic that way. But the problem with that would be that it would always have the first character in the party go first, and I kind of want to be able to write these scripts in such a way that when I'm writing bots, I don't want things like the order of the party, right, from left to right to matter. So I want to randomly pick an awake character in the party and have them do the wake up. So I want to be able to, and this isn't the only example of that, right? This bat one down here is another example of this where I want to be able to write party level scripts. And so that's the main challenge today. There's finished getting the wake up thing working, and then do this party level script for a bat as well and see if I like that. But I don't have any answers for that yet, so I want to do a few passes of cleanup here. I'm not sure what I'll do, but I'm thinking of maybe eliminating this brain structure until I'm sure that something like that is desired in this system. And I also want to figure out how I would define a character or a creature with a party brain script instead of an individual brain script, which is how all of these work. Like the snake here, it's just programmed as if it is the brain of a snake, right? A single individual snake, and each one runs independently. Whereas here, I kind of want the entire swarm of bats to behave like this. The idea of this is that the entire swarm of bats would behave in a predictable way as if controlled by a single decision maker, right? And in particular, what it's doing is just picking one random bat and having that one attack, and the rest don't attack every turn, because the bats are going to, separately, the bats are going to have, you know, feature of flying that makes them harder to hit if they don't use a melee attack, but their only attack will be the basic attack, which is melee. So they will attack one at a time to minimize their vulnerability, and you'll have to figure out a way to either hit the ones that are flying so you can knock them out faster, or you'll end up taking a hit from every single bat, and if you're not able to hit the bat that's hitting you, you'll have another problem, right? So this is sort of the way I'm trying to create some interesting behavior out of this rather simple combination of, you know, features, is by giving them interesting brains so that their behavior is also part of the puzzle, part of the RPG challenge in the simulation. But I don't have any good way of scripting this, so I want to make some progress, and hopefully today I can get one or both of these party brain scripts up and running, and maybe be able to create creatures this way as well, figure out how to put player brain scripts. Like this one here is more of a player brain script, and I want to figure out a way to put multiple of these together, because I also have a brain script for how to use the antidote item right here, and so it's like, how am I going to combine multiple little segments of brain? How is the composition of brains going to work? There's a lot of questions coming out of all this, but for now, the main question is just, can I upgrade the API to do things like acting as? So acting as turns the rest of the commands underneath it into sort of independent. So, you know, here we're writing the brain script for a snake. So whenever we have a snake, this is saying use venomous bite, acting as that snake is implicit. Whereas when we're scripting for a party, we're gonna have to say when we want to use the same APIs, right? We have all these APIs that reference, that are written as if a particular entity is just known in context. And since it's a party script, there isn't a particular target or character that's known in context, so we have to select that one in. And there are other things that I want to do here that are not so obvious. Like maybe I want to be able to create sets, like this is saying role target has tiles. So that's just a target selector. That's another target selector. So those are all fine. Yeah, I guess for now these are all fine. But whenever I've been writing these, I keep running into situations where I kind of want to create like subsets and then do a role on those. And maybe at some point, instead of having all of my role X, role Y functions, what I'll want is a single role target function, and then a subset has tiles, subset is active, and so on and so on. And I don't know how all that would work either. So I don't know, things I might end up touching today, just looking at what it is that I've picked as the thing to work on. Let's see how far I get, and if I come up with some solutions, I will show you what they looked like along the way, okay? Okay, first little piece of progress that I decided to make is to start digging into how I'm using this macro system for declaring these characters. And I finished a small to-do that I had for creating some characters that just don't need a specialized brain. There's a default behavior that works just fine for both of these characters, so they just had empty functions for their brains, and now that is separated. I think where this is pushing me is to separate out the idea of brains and characters, which are kind of, interconnected here. I specify a brain, and that gives me the function. The brain is this function that I write. Separately, there's also this brain state that I think I can eliminate, which I might also try to do. But point is, I have to write the function, and then I also create the character, and I might want to kind of separate that, because the characters, I might want to use the same brain several times for different variations of the hit points, which are specified by these pluses and damage, and the maybe special abilities and stuff could be slightly different, or items could be different. And what's happening right now is that each character ends up needing its own completely separate brain, or it can now do this no brain option. And I kind of think that the right first step might be to say, when we create a character, we can't just say here's a brain here it has its own brain. We might want to pass the brain in, and I want to see if stepping in that direction helps me to clear up in my head other things that I need to do. All right. Okay, so here's a little more progress on cleaning up the brain scripting. So I have the new brain thing I showed before, and now all the brain functions are getting declared sort of separately. I think the next step from here might be when I declare one that I'll kind of type these. Like there might be like a kind right here, so there will be like RPG brain kind target or like character, right? So this would be like a character brain. I might mark it like that, and this would be like there could be like a party brain, and there could be a what's the word? A tile brain even maybe. So for instance, talking about the tile brain thing, there's this scout part where I was cleaning this up and realized I had a to-do here that I could finish, which is I can now let the scout character reuse the mercenary brain, because they both did the same thing. This run ahead was a part of the simulation that I haven't recreated yet that just doesn't matter, and I'm just ignoring it for the moment. And so the scout just needed the same brain as the mercenary, and now they can actually do that with the way I've structured things. But I think it'd be even cooler to start thinking about, like, what if I did write this script again for this? Like, if I got this part of the game simulation up and running again, and then I wanted to implement the AI for using both of these, the bot brain for using both of these tiles in the same character, couldn't I do that by just maybe specifying an order of how to apply each tile brain separately? Or just say like, hey, it'll run the tile brains by default in the order they're put in for the character in that priority order. And then if you want something more sophisticated, you have to write a character brain to replace that. But that would be cool, right? Because then I could start relying on defaults like, hey, anything that's just a single tile character like these can just grab the tile brain. And if there are multiple of them, then it can just use the order, right? It's just the whole sequence of deductions of what to do with defaults could be pretty useful and go a pretty long ways. And I've been finding over and over again with like these little scripting syntaxes and stuff that these nice defaults that can let me push the system pretty far, and then having a fallout case for the more complicated situation where I need like a full-on character brain to determine when to do one or the other between competing strategies. That has been working in other cases, so I think I might want to push in that direction and put some kind of kind informations into the brains, and that'll get me a step closer to having an idea of what a party brain actually is and how it gets attached to things and when it gets executed. All right, so I'm going to keep going with these little steps. Okay, this is me talking to you from in the middle of editing this. Unfortunately, about 30 minutes of my log, the audio didn't record. I must have had an accident with my microphone muted in the software or in the hardware or something. But luckily, the last couple logs are still intact, so I can show you after all the debugging logs that are just lost. I can show you the final couple steps of the tile brains, which are the new way of creating the default. I did just what I said in the suggestion there. I put a brain on each tile, and if the character doesn't have a character level brain and the party doesn't have a party level brain, then the default is to run all the tile brains and to put them in a specific order. And I'm going to talk from the upcoming log to the end through the rest of the problems that I solved. All right, I'm very, very close to being done with this and having it working. I've got this tile brain for the wake up tile. The tile grant part from sleep is working. So the only problem is that the wake up brain never gets run. And the reason for that is wake ups get granted rather than being attached to the entity directly. And so they're not in the list of children. And so when the entity runs, when the target, the character entity runs its tile brains, it does not see the wake up tile, and so it doesn't run the wake up tile brains. So I need to figure out how that part's going to work. And there's a second problem, which is that if this is added later, then it'll run after other things like, the default to basic attack, and this is an action, so you have to only do one, which means this needs to take higher priority than all the default behaviors you have if you want to do it. So maybe the answer is you run the tile brains for the grants before you run all the tile brains that you have underneath. If not that, though, I might need to add like some kind of priority system. Like I might need to start going like this. How would this work? I'm not sure. It's a little unfortunate because I'd have to change all the tile brains to have this. Otherwise, they'd run at every priority. Unless it wasn't a part of the if, it might be like declarative. You might run it first. And that would mean, hey, if we're in high priority pass, then these things get enabled after you've seen this. But if we're in a regular priority pass and we don't write one down, then these things are enabled here and disabled here, right? So this could be like the Boolean returns here on these ifs are being conditioned on whether or not priority was declared that matches the current priority sweep. Maybe also priority, if I do want to put it on all of them, I could go like standard priority, high priority, right? I could just add that to all the brains or all the tile brains or something. So a couple ideas. I'm not sure which one I'm going to want most, so I'm going to take steps towards it and see what comes out. Okay, so this problem is coming down to a knot tied in with this piece of code right here. And I'm going to talk through what this is doing. So this is the brain play function. Its job is to take in an entity and execute the appropriate brain logic for that entity. And so that includes figuring out all the default stuff that needs to run. It can call recurse, which now can call the usable moves as well as the child entities. and pass. When I say call them, I mean runs the brain play on those entities, and those entities can be tiles that have been granted. And so we should be able to get to this point, but the problem then is granted tiles don't follow this part of the rule. So it'll be a tile type brain for now, because I haven't got party brains on tiles yet. That might take an extra step of reimagining this, but imagine for now that it'll be a tile brain. It'll be a tile entity, but its parent won't be a character. So when it comes through here and we set the brain tile, this part will be right. We'll know the correct tile, but then we'll look at the parent and we'll go, wow, look at that. That's actually not a target. There's a problem. What's going on? And what should probably be happening is something like all of this needs to be re-understood somehow. I'm not sure how exactly. Like these maybe need to be parameters at some point, I'm feeling. So for instance, brain play here. Well, the hard thing about making them parameters is, yeah, well, here's what I was trying to get to though. The thing we could do to solve this for now is to say you don't run this piece if you've already set the target or party, right? So this is only if they're 0. So instead of zeroing them out always, we would say the person calling brain play needs to be assigning these appropriately or something, right? This is where it gets tricky, since if I set target and party here, I could do it. I could go, the context brain target could be the entity, right? Maybe that would be correct if this is a target. We don't know what kind of entity is, so we might need to look at that too. But up until now, I've been able to assume that I can just pass in an entity to figure out what brain to run, and that the entity is sort of topologically associated with all of the parents and children that it needs to figure out its defaults and figure out what context it runs in. Now that's not true. This entity does not have the right parent to figure out what's going on with it. And so it's not connected to the target anymore. And so I'm going to need to go and reparameterize this and think about maybe these all need to be parameters now, like tile target party, and then the brain entity or something. I don't know. I need to think through what this means for how this gets written. Okay. Finally, I've got the whole thing working. This is actually pretty cool. It's always fun when a new system's up and running. So in the simulation log here, I can walk through this and see the two sleeping spores, or the two sleeper mushrooms here are putting sleeping spores on this and this guy. So they're getting those sleep tiles. And then some damage got dealt out to the other party as well. And they took a damage from the guy with the basic attack. And then this guy was still here. So he hits again while they're waking each other up, right? You can see that the sleep tiles go away in the middle of combat, and then they don't come back. No matter how many of them there are, they don't come back between encounters. They always get everybody up again there. So they actually make it pretty far, but they didn't make it the whole way there in this log. But we can do analyze roads mode, and there's a bunch of well, not a bunch. There's something cool I saw there. I always find this part exciting. So I'm just going to look at the comparison of the thing I was just showing you. So the log of the encounter with the one basic attack guy and the two sleeping mushrooms. That's being repeated 6 times. I'm taking that and I am then blending it with just a different encounter that I've got. And this thing pops out that sort of measures for me how difficult this new thing is compared to the ++2, given a particular, party benchmark. And so in this case, I'm using those adventurers, and I get this for the benchmark on the difficulty. And you can see it's like very mixed up in here. The ++2 actually turns out to look a little easier than this encounter, and yet it doesn't make any kind of gradient, and there's a lot of variance on these. So that's interesting. I think that what this particular diagram is showing me is that this is a an encounter that would sometimes wipe you out and sometimes give you no trouble at all, or something like that, right? It seems like it's very high variance. So looking at that, I was then thinking, okay, well, if that has a lot of, you know, randomness to it, maybe I can just tweak it. And I took off one of the pluses. So each plus is a heart in the RPG simulator. So I made that character just one heart less. So he's not a normal basic attack guy. He's some kind of, he's a mushroom who hits you or something. So he goes with the sleeper mushroom party. And then look at that. It pops out as this nice, simple uh, gradient. It's just a little bit easier than the plus plus two. So it gives me a new tool for if I'm trying to build a fair early game out of the different pieces. I can now see like, oh, here's another tool of something that's interesting. It's not just basic. It's a little easier than plus plus two. It doesn't wipe out the party very often when it's just this thing 6 times. So this is how I've been using these tools to explore this, and I get to show you one iteration of that now. And I got the whole grants and uh, using granted actions thing working. I'll show you the brain scripts to close it out. The way it ended up working, oh, that's not where the code is. The way it ended up working is that I just marked the brain as high priority. And I'm not necessarily happy about it, but I think I've begun to hit against the wall in terms of what I can do without doing a major rewrite and refactor on the system so far. I've been sort of rapid fire adding new things as long as there was more space and room to grow. And it feels like I'm hitting a wall now. And that is the sign to me that I can't expand like a balloon anymore. I need to figure out the shape of what I'm building and refine. And if I refine well, I generally end up making it so powerful that I can start using it in new ways, and I can see how to add in the stuff or find room for the things that I was hoping to get to and do better. So in this case, the fact that this ended up being marked as high priority was just because there was a lot of other stuff that was making it too hard to just use the sorted order. The wake ups always get put on the back of the list because they're granted after the other tiles, so just using the order of tiles wasn't enough anymore. And anything else involved too much of a new expansion into a large data structure system for sorting the brains or something. So I just went with a very simple sort. There's high priority and then regular priority. Basically, each element gets sorted into one of two buckets, and I still preserve the order rule within those priorities so that the effects that I like of being able to put a special move on a basic character and then put the basic attack after that, and they'll use their special move if they can, and then they could fall back to the basic one. That's a useful default pattern. So this all seems like it could be headed in a better direction, but this is good enough to get this version going, and it was the sign to me that it's time to back off from expanding and to take a short break and come back with the plan to do a big rewrite, like kind of ground up what are the key principles of this RPG sim thing, and do it more hardcore than I did in this past because I've hit that wall.